How's it going, Internet? It's Cameron with Venus Theory, and today we're here for another episode of The Sauce, the show where I talk about gear, plugins, and my own 13 herbs and spices when it comes to music production. I am extremely excited for this video because I finally got my hands on the V Collection 7 from Arturia. In this video, we will be going through each and everything inside the V Collection except the clavinet because I forgot about that, and talking about them and showing off the presets and sounds and the functionality. V Collection 7 comes in at $500, and I think that is more than a fair price, especially after playing with all of the individual synths for a while and just tweaking them and playing with presets and just the amount of work and thought that went into the V Collection and making things like a DX7 or the Fairlight CMI or the Sinclavier accessible and fun to use. I applaud Arturia to the moon for how well this was done. All of these synths are super fun to use and sound excellent. I believe all or maybe most of the individual synths can actually be purchased separately. I think they're about $150 each seems to be the asking price, which I think is pretty fair in the case where maybe you just want like the DX7 or maybe you just want the Jupiter 8 or something like that. I think that's a fair price. However, I would personally say I think it's worth it to invest the extra money and get the entire collection because the range of sounds and the presets and everything about it, I think, is more than worth that asking price, and it's just a ridiculous tool to be able to access, and all of the synths sound phenomenal. Beyond that, just the interfaces and how easy it is to use some of these synths is just excellent, because things like a DX7 in real life are a total pain in the ass, and things like the CS80 weigh 200 pounds, and why would you want such a thing? Or the Jupiter 8, which sounds phenomenal, but it costs $20,000. So being able to have all of these things just at your fingertips and actually having them sound pretty damn close, I think is just one of the coolest things and just such an amazing tool. Alright, so here we are, and I figured I would start things off by talking about one of the new synths in V Collection 7, which is the CZV. This is based around the Casio CZ phase distortion synths. Pretty cool little synth, sounds like this. Very 80s sounding. These were released in like the mid 80s. This is the synth that the original Respace was created on. One of them was. I already put out a video about that. Otherwise, pretty interesting synth, and I really like the sounds of it. I really like the presets were all really well done. And there's a lot of cool kind of tricks up its sleeve, kind of from what I know about these. So compared to the original, the V Collection obviously adds more features and power, which is pretty neat. So this is probably one of the more simple synths in the V Collection. It's just two oscillators. You can do ring modulation and noise. You can be mono or poly, and that's pretty much it on the front panel here. Nothing too crazy. Inside of the synth, this is where things are actually pretty cool. So we'll just go ahead and go to the default setting here and take a look at it. So this is based around phase distortion, like I said, and that means that you get this control. This is DCW. This controls the amount of phase distortion applied to that oscillator. So right now it's just a sine wave. You'll see in line 1 here. If I up this, it becomes a saw. Pretty simple idea, but with this envelope here, you can actually draw in as many points as you want, which is pretty neat. So it's limited to a couple pretty basic waves: saw, square, pulse, double sine, saw, pulse, reso 1, reso 2, and reso 3. And the CZV allows you to add a custom one. So we can set a base waveform like that, I guess, and then a target. We can change what we want it to target to. I don't really know what that's going to sound like, but sure. So now we can use this to create our own custom waveforms, which is really, really cool and powerful. And the synth has a really nice sound to it. I like it quite a bit. So doing the custom waveforms, And, you know, doing some like detuning and stuff can make things really interesting in terms of like pads and textures or bass sounds or things like that. And you hear it there as I press the key. You know, having that envelope going around for the DCW here, you can add a lot of modulation and interesting kind of stuff going on. Beyond that, not really a whole lot else to say about it. Like I said, you get 2 oscillators. You get basic stuff like detuning. You can change the octave between the 2. Ring modulation. So we could do things like that, which is kind of cool. You can drop the master tuning. You can add unison down here, unison voices. So you can add unison detune up here. That's kind of a cool ravey type sound. Beyond that, yeah, that's pretty much it. Arpeggiator, vibrato, macros, portamento, poly or mono. That's about it. Envelopes are pretty powerful. Just kind of regular old stuff, really. You know, you can add a pitch envelope. You can draw as many points as you want to any of these envelopes, which is incredibly powerful, and we'll get into that more later with some of the other synths. Mod envelopes, and you get a mod matrix, so you get a 16-slot mod matrix, which allows you to get real crazy with stuff. And you get some effects. You can have 4 effects. There's a bunch of different effects types, so you can insert these and kind of add some extra flavor and character. And one of these effects is actually a filter, the multi-mode filter, so that's nice to have for some of the other sounds you might want to make with this. I think this is maybe the same filter they did with pigments, but I'm not entirely sure on that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the CZV. Really cool little synth. I like it quite a bit, and I think it's got a pretty badass sound to it. Sometimes that's a bug I have with it. Right now, if I just unmute this, sometimes for whatever reason the CZV tends to stick on a key. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. So really cool little thing. So let's move on. Okay, moving right along, we got this guy. That's a song that's copyrighted and played poorly. So this is the Mellotron, and I'm probably going to do the rest of the keyboards and stuff last, but I just wanted to show this one as well first because it's one of the new things in V Collection 7, and I think this is actually pretty cool. So the Mellotron, in case you don't know, is a really old keyboard thing, and it's kind of one of the first samplers in a way. It's kind of a neat little piece of tech. So back in the day, the Mellotron is a keyboard that for every single key had an individual tape loop of a sound, and you could switch between 3 different sounds. I think the factory ones was like strings, choir, and maybe this flute sound. I'm not entirely sure. Or you can activate all of them at once, and you can kind of blend between them to create different sounds. Or you can turn them all on. So this is a pretty cool one, and has some really interesting sounds. And, you know, a lot of character. The pianos especially, I really like these pianos, mostly for like kind of trap loops. I don't know why. It's just like something about the way Arturia modeled this and the tape flutter and stuff. It just sounds like every trap loop ever from a sample pack. So that's kind of cool. But once you open this up, I think one of the cooler things about it is you get a lot of control over the different parameters. So the piano's here. If we go ahead and adjust like the tape saturation, you can add more flutter. It gets pretty extreme. You can add more mechanics, which is the noise and stuff of like pressing keys and the key release. You can kind of hear that if I turn it all the way up, and like the playhead stopping and starting. Noise floor. And yeah, you can do aftertouch to flutter, which is kind of neat. So yeah, that's pretty neat stuff, and other basic controls. But I think the coolest thing about this is the edit button, because you can actually load in whatever you want here. So if we just go ahead and move this to, we'll go to track C here. Just give me just that one. There we go. So I'm just going to load in a different sample. So that's kind of cool. Or you can actually load in your own, which I thought was pretty neat. So I'm just going to like find something here. We'll grab one of the pad sounds or something from one of my sample packs. We'll go to, let's see, Avenoir had some cool pads. So yeah, there we go. And we can go ahead and adjust the sample and play this back. And I think that's pretty cool. And I've had a lot of fun doing like vocal chops into this and drum loops and things like that. And just the amount of like kind of character and dirt this adds is pretty neat. And I find adding something like, if we just did like a giant reverb on top of this, I think this is pretty cool. And you can actually set a looping point here. So we can just kind of like set up some kind of loop, sure, and play out, you know, a nice big chord. Adds a really interesting lo-fi sound to things. Other than that, you can add some effects here. There's some cool little stomp box things, so you can add like a phaser. We could do a delay. We could add a bit of chorusing. There's an EQ already added. Maybe we could add an amp and do like a big room and see what that sounds like. Pretty cool. Yeah, so that's Mellotron. The Mellotron itself isn't really a complicated thing. It's just a really cool historical thing. And I think this sounds pretty accurate. I've never seen a Mellotron in real life or played one. But I did watch some videos of a Mellotron and kind of like A/B it, and I think it sounds pretty damn close. Otherwise, I think it's just a fun little thing to work with. Not really something I would use the default sounds from, maybe, other than just for some character. The strings are kind of cool, but otherwise, like I said, the biggest thing that I've found to be the draw to this is loading in your own samples and adding that character. And if Arturia, if you ever see this, I would love to see some kind of VST that does this. Like, I'd love to be able to slap this onto a track as an insert, you know, just some kind of lo-fi-ing plugin I think would be great. So let's keep on trucking here. Okay, so in front of me now, we have the Jupiter 8V, which is the synth I was most excited about. If you guys know me, I love the Jupiter synths, and if I could own any synth in the world, this would be it. And unfortunately, they cost like $20,000, so that's never going to happen. But I'm just going to go ahead and play this, and it will speak for itself. This is just phenomenal. I can't believe how good this sounds. So let's give her the old college try here. So that is the Jupiter, and I mean, Just sounds fantastic. If we take off the extra effects here, we can just give this kind of a play by itself. We'll go ahead and adjust this. And this, the filter they did here, sounds incredibly close to the actual Jupiter, which I like quite a bit. Yeah, big fan of the Jupiter. This is like the synth of the 80s. This is really cool to be able to play with. And, you know, we've got the, you know, all the classic controls. Everything sounds really good. I really can't complain about this thing. And it, you know, this is like the sound of the 80s. And I love just the Jupiter sound and the fatness and depth to Jupiters. And it also sounds a lot like Stranger Things, which is like, I don't think this is the synth they used to do the Stranger Things theme, but I think it's pretty close with something else, but I think you could do that. Pretty close. Yeah. So that's the Jupiter. Beyond that, I mean, just again, presets are really good. In terms of extra stuff, you can mess with all the settings here, but inside here, there's this Galaxy modulator, I guess is what I would call it. So this is actually kind of neat. So you can actually set this to target different things. The X output, we could do VCO2 pitch by this much. And you can adjust the rate of things, make it nice and slow. And you can make this rotate to kind of move things around. So now we would get some interesting modulation. And you can apply this to a whole slew of things. So, you know, once you add in some effects, like we could do I don't know, we could do a chorus into the delay, into a reverb, I guess. That's typical processing. And just wash it out. Oh, that was a burp. Wash it out a bit, add a filter of some kind. So that's probably a bit extreme. So yeah, a bit extreme, but pretty cool. I really like that. You get a sequencer, keyboard controls here, so you can target this different stuff, which makes it pretty flexible. Effects-wise, you get a couple effects here and a couple different effects here. Pretty cool. Really like it. Really been enjoying this. Use this in a lot of songs I've been working on lately, just because, like, you know, love the Jupiter. I think it's great. Interface-wise, once again, they really killed it. And that'll be in this next one we're going to talk about. So let's move right along.
The DX7, the DX7, the DX7, and this sound, the sound that I hate more than anything on Earth.
Christ, I hate that sound so much. So, God, that was just almost painful. This is the DX7, and this is a synthesizer I've almost bought on several occasions, and I never did, because like every time I've played one of these in real life, it has been so cool, but such a pain in the balls to program. I cannot even describe what it's like to try and do like a cool patch on a DX7. It's this tiny little screen. It's incredibly frustrating, but it just sounds awesome. But this is where I kind of wanted to get into the interface of the V collection and why I think Arturia absolutely killed it. So, like I said, the DX7 is the biggest pain in the ass on earth to program, and that's why I never bought one. Even though I found some great deals, I'm always like, I always remember when I've played with them, it just makes me want to drive a fork into my eye to program something. But Arturia did a great job opening up this interface in a really sensible way, and a way that makes it quick to program, but also fun. It doesn't suck the life out of you to program a sound in the DX7, which is something I cannot say about its real life counterpart. And if you've ever used a DX7 in real life, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Envelopes wise, once again, you get unlimited control over the envelopes and stuff, which is just super, super cool. There's effects, there's 4 effect slots. Everything else is very straightforward and very much like the real thing. Just, you know, it has this big fancy interface now and everything's broken up nice and neat. So, you know, like patching together sounds is super easy. So we'll just go ahead and initialize here with the default DX7 sound, and we'll close this guy on up. So right now, we just have sine wave, nothing fancy. We can open this up and take a look at our operators. So you get the full DX7 waveform set, I'm pretty certain. So you don't get a custom waveform, which Arturia, once again, if you see this video, please, that would be super cool. And I would also really love to see white noise added in here. As it is right now, though, incredibly, incredibly powerful. This, you know, FM synthesis is really, really powerful stuff. So we can select a waveform. I'm just going to start off with the sine here, and we get control over the envelope. So we have our amplitude. We can detune. You can do linear or exponential FM. You can add a filter to that operator. I think this is actually per operator feedback, which is kind of cool, if I'm correct in that. Yeah, so this is operator 1 feedback. So you actually get per operator feedback, which can be incredibly powerful. You can get polyphony control here, unison detuning, global pitch bend control, and I think everything else is kind of in the other tabs. There's not really anything. The DAC resolution. So you can actually switch between vintage and modern, which basically changes the engine to be modern, super pristine, or vintage and sound more like an actual DX7. I don't really mess with it. I usually just leave it on modern because that's the default. Vintage can add some kind of unpleasantness, but can also add a bit of character to certain patches. I haven't spent enough time with it to really figure out a case use for messing with it. So I've been rambling. So yeah, we have a sine wave. So let's go ahead and add operator 2. And we can adjust our algorithms. So we could do something with algorithm 17, sure. So we'll just add a little bit of offset here. Cool. So we've got that going on here, and now we can really quickly mess with our envelopes and patch something pretty neat. And doing that on an actual DX7 would have taken like 30 minutes. Like, that would just be annoying to do. This one, big old mod matrix as well, 24 slots. So you can target just about anything with just about anything, which is pretty damn powerful. And that opens up a whole lot of flexibility. Like I said, you get controls here. Other than that, run-of-the-mill stuff. You want some feedback? Do you want glide? Do you want ARP? Do you want macros? And it's pretty easy to tie stuff to stuff, which is nice. And that's all done in your mod matrix. So like if I wanted to tie something to something, so we'll do... Yeah, so macro 1 is going to control operator 2 frequency. So pretty cool stuff. Really, really, really like the DX7, and honestly, I'm glad I never bought one. And I think that Arturia killed it with this. It sounds exactly like a DX7, and I like it very much. And that's all I have to say about that. So let's move on. Alrighty, boys and girls, next up we have the Synth Eevee. This is new in V Collection 7, and this one I might gloss over a little bit. I'm not really all that familiar with it. I know that it's made by EMS. I know Pink Floyd used it, and they used it for like Doctor Who. It's like weird. Basically, this is a portable modular synth that came in a briefcase, and it used a patch pin matrix. So instead of using, you know, cables to jump from one module to the other, you'd have these little pins and you can just plunk them on in there. And that's how this synth worked, which is kind of cool. Pretty portable and pretty weird. So I'm just going to kind of flip through some presets and we'll take a listen. So originally this was a mono synth, and you get 4-voice polyphony, I think. Yeah, so you get 4 voices of polyphony if you want it. And that's one of the things I like so much about the V Collection. I will stop a moment to say that, is that Arturia not only emulated these and got the emulations really damn accurate from what I can tell, but they also took the time to, like, you know, improve these things. So it's not just a one-to-one recreation, but, you know, it adds kind of what I would consider essential modern functionality to, you know, bring these synths to the modern era, which I think is really, really cool. So this is a pretty fat sounding synth. I like it. Capable of some really cool, pretty sounds, and also some cool kind of sound effecty, you know, like 70s sound effects, like Space Gun here, yeah. You know, stuff like that. I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, I really don't know enough about this synth to be like, oh yeah, it sounds just like it. But aside from that, you get some sequencer stuff, which is pretty cool. This patch pin matrix is really, really flexible. I don't really understand it well enough to patch anything useful. But other than that, you get a pretty big and in-depth matrix of stuff here. So you get these functions that can be used to control a whole lot of things, like the filter frequency, and you can add as many curves as you'd like, which is pretty cool. The joystick can be used to control things. So there's an XY joystick right here, outside of that mod matrix, and some effects, which is pretty neat. And like the sound of it. I don't know that I'll use it all that much, at least until I'm more familiar with it. So I think that's all I'm going to say about this one, and we can keep on trucking. So back to the land of things I actually know about. This is another synth I would love to own, but could never afford. This is the Matrix 12, which is an Oberheim synth, and this guy runs about $10,000, and I would adore to have one of these in real life. So this is kind of the analog version of, I guess, something like Absinthe. It's, you know, really, really powerful, really excellent pad synth. I think it's pretty much like the synth for pads when it comes to hardware, outside of like digital stuff like Access Virus or the Waldorf stuff. But anyways, this is the Oberheim Matrix 12V, and I'm just going to play a sound here. Really, really excellent. And Arturia killed it. I think this sounds exactly like it. And I don't know how they did what they did for the V collection. I mean, it just sounds so dead on, like the oscillators of this. So one of the coolest things about the Matrix 12, in case you don't know, especially given when it came out, is it had like 15 different filter types. Yeah, so you get a whole mess of really, at the time, pretty cutting edge stuff. But this really allows you to create some interesting sounds. So I'm just going to go ahead and default this guy out, and we'll go ahead and just kind of patch something together to show you how this works. Because I think people, in some of the videos I've seen of people messing with the Matrix 12, they're like, I don't understand it. But it's pretty cool, and I really enjoy patching with it. And, you know, it didn't cost me $10,000 to play one, so that's great. So right now we've just got a saw. So I'm going to blend in the second saw and add a pulse. This pulse width, I'm going to add some modulation. So I'm going to set LFO 1 to target that. I'm going to increase the amplitude of the LFO. That will allow me to mess with that. Cool. So we're sounding good. So I'm going to change this to a pulse as well, and we're going to set LFO 2 to target that. Change LFO 2 to do an upsaw. Pretty low. There we go. So I think we'll change that to a down saw. So now we've got some nice detuning stuff going on, and then we can maybe mess with the filter. So this is going to be tied to envelope 1. So envelope 1 we could add a nice attack to. We could add some modulation from LFO 3 to the resonance of the filter. Get some really kind of cool sounds here. So we can add some FM, so I'm going to add that from, let's do ramp 1. And then we'll do that with envelope 3. And add a nice, interesting envelope here. And then we can open up our, let's see. Let's go into our effects and add something. So we'll add a nice delay into a big reverb. Reverb makes everything better. Cool. So now we're starting to get somewhere. So let's open up our voices. And what we can do is actually detune our voices individually, which is pretty powerful. But we can also transpose them, so you can create kind of interesting stuff you couldn't really do otherwise once you get into polyphony and whatnot. So we'll do that, and then that. Okay. So now, as we get into stuff and kind of mess with it, turn this up. It's pretty quiet. So as we get into this, mess with it, and kind of play about with things, you'll hear it starts to really add some interesting character. Really like the way this guy sounds. I kind of refer to this as the PS2 synth. In my mind, this just sounds like every video game soundtrack ever, and I really like it. But yeah, the pad sounds alone. Big selling point, and you know, once you get into adding some stuff like a lot of tal chorus and a tal reverb and just get stupid with it, glorious sound. So yeah, I could sit here all day patching and messing with this thing. I love the sound of the Matrix 12. So, you know, good things must come to an end. Let's keep on moving here. Okay, so next up we have the Yamaha CS80. This is the Blade Runner synth, if you didn't know that. If you're into soundtracks like I am, you know what this synth is. This is like every 80s movie ever. So this is a pretty interesting synth. It's in real life, or if you stop this and Google them, you'll see pictures. It's huge. It is absolutely massive. I've never seen one in real life. It'll set you back quite a bit of dollar monies, and the sound of like the fans and stuff in this is so loud. It's really ridiculous. But I think Arturia really did it justice, and I think it sounds excellent and just such a cool synth. But in real life, it's like, I think it weighs about 200 pounds. So, you know, this thing will break your wallet and your back if you wanted to play one. But this is really cool, and I enjoy the sound of this. So let's just go ahead and play some notes here and see how it sounds. Pretty neat. Let's try. I apologize, some of these are so quiet. Let's go ahead and maybe just add a quick boost of volume here. So really good emulation, I think, at least to my ear. And for, you know, like I said, the fact that this doesn't cost $1 bazillion and isn't going to break my back if I had to move it, pretty cool. And you get the pitch ribbon here. Which you can't really do anything with without like a special controller, but whatever. Outside of that, really cool. On the inside, pretty straightforward. You get this multi thing here, which is think it's just basically per voice. Yeah, this is voice 1, voice 3, voice 4. So this is just per voice messing with stuff you can transpose or detune, which is pretty powerful, much like the Matrix 12. Modulation-wise, a little more straightforward mod Matrix, nothing too crazy. But all around, I think, very, very cool. Sounds great. And just, you know, gives it that 80s feel to just about everything. And I know a lot of these are, you know, emulating old synths, and that might be a turnoff to some of you guys. But I mean, a lot of these really work great for modern production. And like I said, I've been using the hell out of some of these, like the Jupiter, the CS80, the Jupiter, the DX7, and a little bit of the Mellotron and things like that. You know, all of these can be used for like modern music. I highly recommend them. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the CS80. It's a giant behemoth, and I think this sounds great. The filter, well, this brilliance control, I guess, rather. Sounds pretty close. It's a very loud synth. I will warn you of that now. But yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, next up here, we have the Mini V. This is the Mini Moog. And first thing I'd like to point out that for some reason I get stepping artifacts when I mess with the filter with a very high resonance. There's a definite stair stepping thing going on there. I don't know what's up with that. So I found that a bit annoying. Otherwise, yeah. Or like your hip hop leads. So yeah, the Mini Moog. This guy, I'm gonna say not the biggest fan of. I think it sounds pretty close. I think Arturia gave it a really good shot. But I think the Mini Moog and the Moogs in general are just something that's really hard to get right in VST form. And I think the filter's pretty good. The stepping thing drives me nuts. I don't know why it does that, but I'm sure that'll be fixed in an update. Arturia seems to update their stuff quite a bit. Other than that, you can turn it polyphonic. You can detune the voices. You can do some unison. You can enable soft clipping. There's noise and stuff. It's a Mini Moog. That's pretty much it. Sounds pretty good. I think in a mix, you'd probably really never know. By itself, I don't think it's quite as, I don't know, chunky as a Moog, but I think it's good enough. Inside of here, there's quite a bit of stuff. There's motion recorder, which I'm just going to come out and say I haven't touched this at all. So I don't really know what this does. Let's find out. What do you do? So it's just some kind of extra modulation thing, kind of like the Galaxy and the Jupiter. Mod Matrix, some effects. That's about it. Pretty cool. Like I said, in a mix, I don't think you'd really be bothered much by it. But I think if you're going for a dead-on accurate Moog sound, you might be a bit disappointed. But yeah, I mean, really nice sound otherwise, and I think in a mix it sounds great. I've used it here and there just on a couple things to mess with, But yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty simple one, not a whole lot to talk about. So along we go. The ARP 2600V. So this is the ARP 2600. If we go ahead and default this guy, this is a semi-modular synth. You didn't actually have to patch anything to get it to play sound. So that's kind of cool. In the Ben and Gear video about this, if you don't know about Ben and Gear's channel, go check him out. He points out that the filter is like the closest he's heard to the real ARP filter, and I would agree with that statement. Very, very cool. And multi-mode filter, which is nice. Outside of that, the presets and stuff, we'll just go ahead and flip through a few here because patching this thing's kind of a experience. Yeah, let's go ahead and just kind of flip through some presets. So, as you might be able to tell, the ARP is useful for kind of weird, hard noise sequences and stuff. It's a pretty cool synth, and patching it can be a bit tricky because it's a little backwards and a little hard to understand. But once you get used to it, it's workable. I think it sounds great, and I think it's pretty accurate to the actual ARP. Really cool for stuff like this. Noise, textures, sequences, things like that. All around, pretty interesting thing. Very, very open and powerful, patchable, tweakable, and a lot of fun to mess with. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing. Behold, the Sinclavier. This is a ridiculous piece of alien technology from 1977, question mark, somewhere around there. Late 70s, this was a synth computer from hell. This is additive FM synthesizer that even by today's standards is pretty ridiculous. So it may not look like much, and even if we open up the second section here, it doesn't look all that crazy, but once you get into it, you can do some ridiculous stuff. You know, we get FM and so much going on here. And from what I know, I mean, this is like the holy grail of synthesizers. And I mean, I think most of the people that bought this were like only ultra super duper successful musicians or like computer scientists, sound scientists, like colleges and stuff bought these things. Like they're stupid expensive when they came out, and even today they're still stupid expensive. So yeah, this is additive and FM. We get 12 partials that you can go through and do stuff to. You can make this samples. You can morph things over time. There's a full mixer, FM controls over here, envelope, LFO. You can mess with the envelopes and stuff. Key dynamics, which the key dynamics allow you to control things across the keyboard, which is kind of cool. Big mod matrix, FX, and master here, so you can do just about anything depending on how much free time you have. So if we just kind of play through some sounds here. I don't know why, but playing some of the presets in this, it really makes me think of like PBS, you know, like the PBS bumper cards. I'm probably dating myself, but from like the 90s, watching PBS, I swear to God, some of these sounds are from the PBS bumper cards. And I might be right. I don't know. I have no idea. So when it comes to programming this beast, we'll just open up a default here. So on the sample side, there's a bunch of samples that you can use to do stuff. So we could do like this guitar sound. So back in the day, this is pretty powerful stuff. But what makes it interesting, I think, is the synthesis side. So we could, we'll start things off with a sine wave here. And this goes on for 300 seconds. I think this is what this is in. It's got to be seconds. So these little frames you can change. So we could do this, and then this, and then this. And then we can change the modulator for each of these. And you can adjust the phase of everything down in here. So yeah, like I said, even by today's standards, very, very powerful. So you can make some really cool, evolving, complex pad sounds for sure. Very, very cool piece of tech. And multiply this across 12 partials, and you can get a whole mess of things happening here. So let's go ahead and do that. Like I said, this goes on for up to like 300, what I assume are seconds. So that's a very long time and a very powerful thing to be able to do. Okay, yep, whatever. Okay, so we got 6 of these going here. We can go into this mixer and open them up. So for each of these, we could pan out the partials, sure. Change the tuning, we can transpose. Chorus here, I'm not sure if this is actually chorus effect. Actually not entirely sure what that does at all. FM over here, and your ratios. So yeah, I mean, for the fact that this existed in the 70s is just mind-blowing to me. And I mean, this thing is so huge that if I had one in here, I mean, it would sound like an industrial fan running, and it would take up this whole room. They were gigantic. But let's get a limiter on that, sorry. Yeah, so pretty cool stuff once you consider, you know, the FM and other such things. Very cool for sound effects and whatnot. Samples, you can load your own samples into here if you wanted to, which is pretty neat. Otherwise, you can just use the default samples, which are pretty cool and can yield some really interesting results. Let's just throw this through giant reverb for the sake of demonstration. Let's put the limiter after that, sorry. Absolutely ridiculous piece of technology for the time. This in itself is like a 6-hour video, so we're just going to move along to the other thing that's very similar to this. The Fairlight CMI. This is another ridiculous piece of technology, especially given the time period, and this has the sound from that one SpongeBob episode. So that's fun. You can also click the keys, which I don't know why they included that, but they did. So way to go, Arturia. So this is the Fairlight CMI, which I suppose is like the first DAW-ish type of thing. It had a sequencer, and it was all done with this little pen right here, which I'm not sure how fun that was to use. Probably not very. The sequencer is fully functional if you wanted to program a sequence this way. I did once. It took forever, and it sounded really stupid. So outside of that, the actual sound of this thing, though, very, very 80s. Very, very cool. lots and lots of mojo. So that, I think, is pretty freaking neat. I think it sounds really cool. Like I said, I think it adds just tons and tons of character. You can load in your own sounds. So that's really annoying. But that's actually pretty fun to mess with as well. Kind of like the Mellotron. I enjoyed just throwing stuff into this and seeing what it sounded like. And again, Arturia, if you ever see this, I would love to see the CMI filter or VST. I'd love to be able to just slap this onto something and use it, because it adds a cool character. So outside of that, there's time synth and spectral synth. This allows you to do a lot, and much like the Sinclavier, this would take like 96 hours to explain and go through, so we're just gonna kind of play some presets. Pretty cool stuff. And in terms of like mod matrix and all of that, this is like probably the most in-depth thing in the V collection. It's pretty cool. You can stack all sorts of stuff together. You can really just tweak to your heart's content with this, which I think is pretty neat. And we can just stack a whole bunch of things together, see what happens. Sure. That's a strange sound. I wonder what would happen. And this is what I mean about the V collection. Like, it's so cool to be able to play with stuff like this and just, you know, see what it sounds like. I guess let's add... I don't know. I just want to see what this sounds like with just a ridiculous level of distortion on it. I have a feeling it's going to be kind of funny. Okay, sure. And then let's add a big reverb onto it. All right, prepare your ears. 3, 2, 1. So cool. What about a really low note? I feel like that sounded epic as hell. Man. That's sick. I love it. So yeah, that is the CMI. As a whole, I think this is kind of like the Vaporwave synth. If you make Vaporwave or something like that, go nuts. This is a hell of a synth for stuff like that. I have mostly enjoyed using the presets. There's some kind of cool sounds in here, and throwing my own samples into it's kind of fun as well. But yeah, this one is, I think, pretty niche. And if you want to sit here clicking keys, you can do that. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing. The Prophet, Prophet 5 and the Prophet VSV. This is a Prophet and the Prophet Vector, and it sounds like this. Prophet 5, Prophet VS, Prophet VS, Prophet VS. Probably not the best example. Prophet VS, this is a bass. So, Prophet and Prophet VS. Prophet VS is a vector synth. If you crack this guy open, you can actually get into some pretty interesting stuff. the mixer envelope here in particular, you can make it move around, which is pretty neat. And you can combine these as well, which is pretty cool. I don't think there's, I don't know if there's a preset just offhand that has them both. But anyways, not the most accurate Prophet emulation that I've ever heard, but pretty cool. And the Prophet VS, I think, is a lot more interesting. The Prophet by itself is a pretty straightforward synth. There's not a whole lot to it. But yeah, the Prophet VS, like I said, I think this is where things get a bit more interesting, especially in terms of like pads and whatnot, because you get a lot of really interesting waveforms, and you know, being able to blend between those with the little mixer knob, mixer lever, mixer stick. Yeah, the mixer stick. Pretty cool thing. I really like the sound of the VS. The Prophet 5, I think there's definitely better Prophet emulations out there, but cool to have. And once again, in a mix, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care whatsoever. I think it sounds good enough, and you know, just how massive the V collection is, it's just super, super cool. So, on to the next thing. So, in front of me here, we have the Oberheim SEM synthesizer expander module, the SEM-V. This guy, I believe the purpose of this was to buy several of these, so you could chain them together and make a bigger synth out of it. And from what I've read on Arturia's page, they added a bunch of stuff that this didn't have, like a second LFO and stuff. Didn't have noise, I guess. I don't know. I don't know all that much about this one either. But I think that says all that needs to be said about it. I really actually enjoyed the sound of this, and it's a deceptively simple thing. But once you get into everything else, you can mess with like voices, mod matrix effects, and you get all the standard stuff that all the V collection things seem to have. But really like the sound of this. Very dreamy, very interesting, and you know, surprisingly modern. And I know I do this for every sound, but this is what I do. At least, you know, could be making respaces with all these, but you know, this synth. I feel like I could write a whole soundtrack with this thing. I love how it sounds, and Arturia killed it with this one. I don't know that much about the original, like I said, and I watched a couple videos on it and read a couple, like, things about it. Pretty cool little synth. I really, really like the way this one sounds. And, like I said, surprisingly inspiring for how very straightforward it is. And, it's pretty much all there is to this one. It's very straightforward, very cool. Moving on. All right, so here we have the Buchla easel. This is a Buchla synth, and this is the other modular format. So this one is pretty weird. I've never used a Buchla system in real life. I know about them. I've never touched one. Pretty cool sound to it. Very aggressive. That was the thing I noticed most about this. I really found it hard to kind of get anything super subtle out of this. But in terms of just like making really ridiculous noises and like drum sounds and stuff like that. Oh yeah, sounds like this. Kind of that FME hard, mean stuff. Very good at doing that. Patching it is pretty straightforward. I have no idea what I'm about to create here. I apologize. I don't think that actually changed anything. But yeah, so that is pretty much all I'm going to say on the Buchla here. It's a pretty interesting one. A lot of cool presets once again. And if you crack it open, bunch of stuff to mess with. I haven't messed with this all that much because, like I said, I'm not that familiar with Buchla systems. This is the same kind of thing as the Jupiter. You can do weird stuff with it. Pretty cool little synth. I probably won't mess with it much. Let's move on. So this brings us to the end of our synth journey with the modular V, and I think it's pretty cool that Arturia took the time to make one of these. And this is one of those other synths that would, this is like a, I don't know, $30-some thousand synth probably. Very cool. I apologize for all the burping. I just ate dinner. Very weird and interesting, much like the real thing. And I've had a lot of fun with this one, making drum sounds. This is kind of really cool for that. In terms of the actual sound, like for synth stuff, I think a lot like the Mini Moog V, it's close and in a mix, close enough. But like I said, for me, the big thing I like most about this was making drum sounds and weird noise sounds, because I think that, I mean, that's kind of what the actual big modular's good at. And, you know, it's very cool that they emulated it. And the fact that you can actually sit here and patch stuff up with it, I think is really cool. And it's nice, like this, you can see me wiggling my mouse here over this FM control, and by moving my mouse up or down, I can control how much it's being modulated. So very cool. Makes it a lot easier to patch than I would think the real thing is. There's so much to this synth and the sounds to it that, you know, it's just kind of impossible to cover. But, you know, really cool. And if you're into modular stuff, I think you'll enjoy this. I think it's really, really cool. I think it's pretty well done. Nice big sound to it, nice and open, very flexible, and I just like that you can fully patch whatever you want. I think it's ridiculous to be able to see this in VST form and have it be emulated pretty accurately. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to this one. Okay, so this brings us to the end of everything. This last section, I'm just going to kind of lump together. There's one more synth thing I kind of forgot to go over, the Selena string ensemble machine. Very pretty, very usable. If you open it up here, you can control the resonators, you can mess with stuff, and pretty straightforward. Not really that fascinating. There's a stereo chorus effect, which is very nice. You can actually control the chorus rate and stuff. I don't really like fast choruses. I think fast choruses sound a bit cheesy, but cool for kind of like old school cinematic pads. Yeah, so let's move on to the next couple things here. These two are really, really great. So I'm going to spotlight these a little bit. The Stage 73. So get your Rhodesy stuff. I think this sounds absolutely fantastic. So great job, Arturia. Next up, the Wurlitzer. I do want to do a video at some point of this because I have the real thing downstairs. I do want to try out the two and just A/B them. This... I think sounds really, really good as well. The overdrive to it sounds really nice. Other than that, great job once again. The vibrato is nice. I think it sounds fantastic. And I imagine if you're like a gigging person and you play stuff that needs Wurlitzer or the Rhodesy things, these would be excellent choices. I think they sound fantastic. Vox Continental, this is an organ. I don't know anything about organs. I know the theme song from Vikings, I think. What's that? I don't know enough about organs at all to know what this does. I know this adds harmonics, partials, something. So cool. I think it sounds like an organ. It's a stupid assessment of it. Yeah, and then you get the amps and foot controls and stuff down here. So that's cool. Sounds good. The Farfisa? I don't know what this is at all, but... So that's... I don't know what this is. I think it's like an orchestral keyboard something. I'm gonna have to read about this. I feel stupid including this in the video and not knowing anything about it, but that's that thing. I think it sounds cool in the little bit of time I've messed with it, which has not been much at all. Cool to use for loops and like backing textures for stuff. Next up, the B3 V2. Okay, moving on. Another organ thing. Like I said, don't know anything about organs. I do know that there's like some kind of special organ MIDI controller you can buy that has the 2 decks and the levers and everything. And I know they cost a ton of money and there's like people that buy them. I was talking to the guy that works at a music shop here, asking about one because I saw it. Someone ordered one in and it was this ridiculous MIDI controller from hell. You can Google it. I'm sure it's out there. I don't know what it was called. This also sounds like an organ. You can control the rotary. You got the foot pedals. Yep. Pretty much all there is to say about that one. Sounds like it should. Piano V is also included. I've talked about this several times. Great little piano thing. Enjoy that. And follows, there is Analog Lab 4. This is basically just a preset browser for the V collection. So you can't actually go away. You can't actually tweak the synths. There are some tweakable parameters. And I had Analog Lab 3 before I got a hold of the V collection, and Analog Lab's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed messing with a lot of the presets and using them in a couple of our tracks. So bonus points if you listen to our music and you can pick out one of the presets that I used. But yeah, V collection, killer. There's nothing else like it. I think it's awesome. Analog Lab 4, another excellent choice at a much lower price point. However, I think if you have Analog Lab and you really enjoy it and you want to do more with it, definitely get the V collection. Yeah, Analog Lab is a great choice as well. And that is it for this video, guys. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm sure we will be talking about some of these instruments more in the future. And be sure to check out the V collection from Arturia. I think it is worth every penny and you will have just a fantastic time with it. It's so inspirational to just sit and play with. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys again soon.